Welcome to the Maine Basketball Rankings Show. I'm your host, the basketball data nerd, Lucas McNally. And with me today is the most prolific man in Maine high school sports, Michael Hoffer. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. Always happy to talk sports, and thank you for the kind introduction.
All right, so my very first question is, have you recovered yet from basketball?
Do you ever really recover from basketball? And I think that's actually a better question for you since you're more immersed in it than I am. To be honest, and at my advanced age, it did take me a little while to recover from all the tournament excitement. I love that time of year. It's my favorite event. It's my favorite time of year, but boy, is it intensive with all the games. And I definitely need a few days, maybe the better part of a week to catch up on sleep when it's done. So, yeah, I
It's a
think
long
so.
drive.
And it is it's a lot of long drive, a lot of late nights, certainly for me. But I love it. It always lives up to the hype, and this year's tournament was certainly memorable.
So you write, so this is what I've always wondered about you. You write like 5,000 words for a game story and, and somehow keep track of
Rarely
everything.
that much, but it has happened. Yeah, yeah.
And like, so
Well,
how long do those
it's
take
lucky.
you to write?
Those take me hour to an hour and a half generally. What I can do is I'll do like the background stuff ahead of time, and
Mhm.
also the look ahead if I know what's going to be happening going forward. But the actual play by play and putting all the quotes together and uploading all the photos and stuff, depending on the length of the story, it's a good hour to an hour and a half, and it's certainly a labor of love though.
And so you're just sort of keeping track of the basic stuff during the game, like points, rebounds,
Right.
like scoring runs, stuff like that.
Exactly. Yep, and then put it all together at the end. But yeah, I try to keep as detailed stats as I can. The stuff like shooting percentage that's a little beyond me. But as far as individual stats like assists and rebounds and block shots, certainly am able to do that. And then of course the scoring changes and the runs because that's so important to games.
hmm I mean, shooting percentages and like turnovers. If you had two people, because I use an iPad, and if you had two people sitting next to each other on an iPad, they probably wouldn't match up 90% of the time.
Oh no, exactly. And that's why I like to do my own, not that I'm 100% right either, but I'd rather rely on my own. And if someone makes a mistake, I'd rather it be me than someone else. But, if someone else is tracking some of that other stuff, I will certainly use it too.
I find it's helpful. I found, especially this year at the expo, I found it really helpful to sit next to Don Shields
Yep.
because then he's calling them out, and I can hear
That,
him in the corner,
yep.
in the
That
corner of my
whatever
ear.
helps. And what in being perfectly honest here, I do record the state games. So when I'm going back to write a game story, there are times, especially if something crazy happens at the end, if I need to go back and look at the videotape, occasionally I'll do that too. But for the most part, I don't need that.
Yeah, I was doing that a little bit, especially for that Spruce Mountain Ellsworth game. Just sort of
Oh,
going, okay,
crazy games.
what was
Yeah.
the structure of this? What was happening? How was this going down? And who actually did what?
Yeah. Yeah, those B
Pretty good
games were
stuff.
wild. And
Yeah.
I'm still not sure why they had them in Portland, but I'm glad they did because it was right in my backyard. And even though I didn't cover either game, I just got to sit and watch them. And both thrilling games down to the wire with some wild leads changes and swings, and just a great way to kind of put the exclamation point on the season.
And you already had a press pass, so you might as well.
Yes, I did. So I might as well use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I heard from MPA people is they would have done it in Augusta because the whole snow thing, and they would have done it in Augusta, but Augusta was booked that day
Yeah. Yeah.
because all of those teams, Augusta was closer
Sure.
than
Oh,
Portland.
absolutely. Right.
So it would have made a
But
lot more sense to
you
do it
got to
there.
say, people traveled well on a weeknight. Ellsworth brought a ton of people down. Spruce Mountain certainly had a lot of people too. So I was impressed with. I guess if your team's in a state championship, for most communities that doesn't happen every day. So you're going to want to make a
Right.
point to get out and see it, and it turned out being worth the drive, I'm sure, for most people.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can all sort of give up one night of sleep for a state game.
I
you
gave up
know?
many that fortnight or whatever it was.
Yeah. I was getting to bed around 2 or 3 most of those nights, I think, for
Yeah,
tourney week.
yeah, yep.
It
That
was a
was that
lot.
was about right for me as well.
All right. So the other thing, one other thing before we get into spring sports is I was doing a little bit of background on you just before we got on here, and I noticed you're from Arizona, which is a
That is
surprise to me because
correct.
I always assumed you were from here since you're like such an ardent Patriots fan, even if your predictions aren't on point all the time.
Not even close half the time, but yeah, I grew up in Arizona. Arizona. I moved to Boston after college, and then I moved up to Portland. And it was a long time ago. I won't even tell you how many years ago because I'll be showing my age. But most people go from the East Coast to Arizona. I did it the
Yeah.
other way around, and love it here. But met my wife here. I'm not going anywhere. This is certainly home at this point.
So, and you went to ASU, right?
I went to Northern Arizona University. Actually, I
Northern
was a
Arizona.
lumberjack. Yes. Yep.
And so, what is it about? I mean, if you grow up in Arizona, you go to school in Arizona, what makes you? I did something similar where after I graduated college, I just moved to Tennessee for a
Yeah.
couple years, but that's because I knew some people who were there.
Yeah.
Was there something like that that got you to Boston?
No,
Just
and I
big
can't
Paul
even
Revere
really.
fan?
Yeah, I couldn't even say there was like one. I mean, certainly the lure of being in a city with big time sports, and going to Fenway Park, and the Garden and all. And of course, the Patriots were horrible when I first moved there, so they were by far the fourth team in the city at that point. But just I don't know, just the allure of being in a big city with the big sports teams. And after I lived in the big city for 2 years, I got sick of the big city. And
Yeah.
Portland's kind of a mini Boston, and it's 2 hours away. And I pretty much have everything I need here. So very, very happy here. And of course, in this day and age, you can watch any team from anywhere. So that's easy enough to do.
Yeah, it's not those old days where you would get like 2 games on a Saturday afternoon,
Yeah.
and then you're pretty
And
much
be
out of luck.
lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, they were not good games sometimes. They
No,
didn't have the idea of flexing out, make a
no,
better game.
no. That's kind of thing was not even in anyone's imagination. Not even that many years ago, really.
Yeah. So did you always know you wanted to be a sports writer, or was that something that came later?
That's something that came later. I was actually a history major in college. I've loved sports. I've been a huge sports fan since about the age of 7 or 8. I've always had my head filled with stats and, and history and, fun party tricks. Like I can, name a year, I can tell you who was in the Final Four, that kind of crazy stuff. But I never
Mhm.
really put two and two together till I was well into my adulthood. Did some career counseling. Finally, it clicked, and luckily when I decided I wanted to get into this field, it was just after really the advent of the internet really taking off. There were all kinds of websites, and it was still kind of the heyday for the newspapers, weekly papers. There were a good amount of options, and just happened to get my foot in the door at the Forecaster. They were looking for someone to to write 2 stories a week for them as a freelancer. Actually, they were looking for a high school or a college kid. I was a little bit older than that at that point, but they took me on, and it kind of evolved into a full time position. So been very lucky. This is the end of my 22nd year, and I
Wow.
know I'm very, very fortunate to do what I do.
What was the thing that triggered it? Because I got into writing late as well, and I'm just kind of curious.
I just, I mean, I certainly had a strong writing background, being a history major, having the research background, and like I said, I mean, I lived for sports. I watch sports constantly, probably a lot more then than I do now, just because get such a fill of it through work. But I knew there was something that I should be doing, something that I would be good at doing, and it really was putting the pieces in place. And then a lot of it early on, I would just watch a game and write a story that nobody read, and maybe that's still the case now. I don't even know, but uh, that's
Well, I read. So
kind of how I honed the skills, and then I was lucky enough to finally find a platform.
well, you gotta spend some time yelling into the void, I think, with anything.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think if you're persistent and people know that you work hard and you care, it often pays off. But there's an element of luck. I mean, I'm not going to lie. If I didn't have people believe in me and take a chance on me, I probably wouldn't have made it. So, I think when I talk to younger people, I always encourage them to follow their passion and just know as much as possible about the world at large, not just sports, because it all does tie together. And hopefully you can do something that you love, and if you do, your life's going to be certainly a lot richer than people that don't have that. So because I've been on that other side too, and I know I'm very lucky.
And this is when the forecaster, this is well before the Portland Press Herald bought it, right? Or before it
Correct.
joined
Yeah.
forces with
Yeah.
the Press Herald.
We were an independent paper back in 2001 when I started. And then we were purchased by the Sun Journal in 2003. We were actually under their umbrella for the next 14, 15 years. And then we were bought out, and we're all under the Press Herald umbrella now, as are most of the papers in the state. So,
Right.
I do write some game stories for the Daily, as well as doing my stuff. And yeah, I mean that's where things stand right now. That's kind of the nature of where the media business is, and a lot of jobs have been lost over the years. So I'm lucky that I'm still able to do what I do.
And now you're all sort of just waiting to see if Reed decides he's going to sell or not.
Yeah, I that stuff is so beyond me, and I'm just gonna keep my nose to the grindstone and do what I do and hope everything works out. And no one's consulting me over sales or whether to sell, not to sell, how much to sell. I'm not a business person, so
They don't have
I'm
you in
just
the
gonna
room
keep
for
doing
that?
what I'm doing. No.
I know Reed because I go running with him sometimes because he's up here
Okay.
and he runs barefoot. And my ongoing joke with him is that if he would stop buying a newspaper, he could afford some running
Like
shoes.
Ford shoes. Yeah. Yep. Well, I think at this point he's probably he's like those old-fashioned old-time NFL kickers that used to go,
Yeah,
without the shoe. The Rich Carlis and the Russell Van Erxleben, and God, I'm dating myself here, but the old-time guys that didn't use a shoe, which I still don't get. But when I was a kid,
I
that's what it seemed like they were all that way.
yeah, it's crazy. The rule of thumb in running is if you're at a race and some dude shows up with no shoes on, then just you don't mess with them.
Yeah, that's
You know, they're
hardcore.
probably
Yep.
they're probably going to beat you. If they're wearing jean shorts and no shoes, then they're probably going to win the race.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't run, so I'll take your word for it.
All right,
Unless someone's chasing me. That's the only time I run.
that's the best time. All
Yeah.
right, so let's talk spring sports. So this year I'm going to do heel points by request kind of for spring sports. And so I
Great.
figured I should talk to some people about spring sports because most people seem to not enjoy the floating divisor with the heel points that they started using for COVID and are still using because it's very confusing.
Yeah.
And there's all these wild swings. So let's talk baseball first.
Yeah.
Baseball, I know about baseball because I actually got into analytics first with baseball. That was sort of the thing that taught me everything. And then a lot of the stuff I do is just converted from baseball. But what does the landscape look like? Because I haven't paid until now any attention really to high school baseball other than checking in the local teams to see how they're doing when the tournament
Yeah.
starts. So what's the landscape look like?
Well, I mean, I can speak more on the greater Portland area than anything because that's kind of what I cover. But there's certainly a lot of good teams down this way. Class A South. I think the feeling is South Portland's the team to beat. They returned two of the best pitchers in the state, in Andrew Heffernan and Nolan Hobbs. They won the state title 2 years ago. They got to the regional final last year and lost to TA. And since they're returning a lot, including a couple of really good infielders in Richie Gilboy and Johnny Poole, and some of these names might be familiar to people from sports like hockey. And Heffernan was on the basketball team that repeated as a state title. So right now, it's kind of really a golden era for South Portland boys sports. Where they've won state titles recently in baseball and basketball, got to the state game in hockey, got to the regional final in football, and a lot of these kids have been involved in a couple or all of these sports. So South Portland seems like the team to beat, but Falmouth has an excellent team too. Not only are they coached by Mike DeAndrea, who is the most accomplished Maine high school baseball coach of all time, but he's got Mike Rutherford, the longtime Portland coach, helping him out this year. So there's a lot of brain power in that dugout this year.
Wow.
It's going to be interesting to see how that all comes together. Falmouth, they might be the best team equipped offensively. The interesting thing with Class A South is there's a lot of really good pitching, but teams are going to struggle to score runs. So, a lot of these games are going to be 2-1, 3-2. Who can generate some runs in these big games against good pitchers. I think Falmouth's well equipped to do that. Thornton Academy lost Cody Bowker. He's at Georgetown now. He kind of led them to the state title last year, but they're going to certainly be in the hunt again. And then there's several other teams. Marshwood had a really nice run last year, surprised everybody, got to the semifinals. I think I hear good things about Kennebunk having a really strong pitching staff. Scarborough's generally very competitive. So I think you never know with baseball too. I mean, you make a couple errors, you have a bad game, you're out. You have a really good pitcher, even if your team's not as good, you can advance. And then Class B South is really interesting too, where Greeley and Freeport have kind of battled each other here the last few years. Last year Greeley had two Division I players, and Zach Johnston, who's now at Wake Forest, and Ryan Colbin, who's going to the University of Massachusetts. And it seemed like they were taking turns throwing no-hitters in perfect games last year. But they did lose to Freeport in the regional final. Freeport had Blaine Coburn, who's now at University of Maine. Both teams have been kind of hard hit by graduation, come back to the pack a little bit. That might give the team like Yarmouth or York or Cape Elizabeth a chance to kind of step into the void. And, and I know, I'm mentioning a lot of these schools that are, a lot of these are good basketball schools too, as well as good in a lot of other sports. But, I'd expect, from my coverage area and from the greater Portland area, these are teams that you're going to be hearing a lot about in the next 2 months.
And that's kind of a theme, isn't it? That when a school is good in one sport, they tend to be pretty
Yes.
good in other sports. There's some
Right.
exceptions.
Yeah, and I mean, and ideally you have athletes who are playing multiple sports, right? Because that doesn't always
Right.
happen. So, and I think, in a lot of these schools that are down this way, you talk about some of the great basketball players from this year. Stevie Walsh from Yarmouth, he's a three-sport athlete. He's a star soccer player. He's playing baseball in the spring. So that certainly helps you be good at more than one sport. And some of these sports are more specialized than others. Some of them are based on having bigger numbers. A lot of the football programs in this area have kind of had diminished rosters in recent years and have struggled a little bit with that. But it doesn't, you look across the board, and whether we're talking soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, or baseball lacrosse in the spring, there's going to be a lot of crossover with these school names.
Yeah, it seems like we'd have crossovers there, maybe less in like wrestling. Like I don't know,
Yes.
you don't really tend to see the wrestling guys show up in like soccer
No,
or
and
anything
the
like that.
schools that tend to excel at that, like Noble, I mean, we don't really talk about Noble in a lot of the other sports, but I mean, that's kind of their crown jewel each year. Wells
Mhm.
is good in a lot of sports, but that's another school that does have a strong wrestling program. So, yeah, it's interesting to see how specialization affects certain sports and certain schools.
Yeah, and now we've got specialization, and now we're starting to see people like go prep, which is going to
Yes.
take out some
Yep.
three school athletes because you're like, well, he's real good in basketball,
Right.
so we're going to go prep, and then you've lost a soccer player as well.
Right, and of course it affects, we love, here we're very provincial. We love our Maine basketball, right? I mean, we would have loved to keep the best players around. We'd love to see JP Estrella play his senior year. We'd love to see Cooper Flag here for 4 years. Players that are that elite. It's understandable why maybe they wouldn't stick around. But on the girls' side, I mean, we were lucky to have Mackenzie Holmes and Anna DeWolf and players like that for 4 seasons. So, but yes, there are more and more options, and I'm not always sure they're the best option. I mean, prep hockey's been an option for many years. I think the feeling is if you're a really good high school hockey player in Maine, you really almost have to go somewhere else.
Mhm.
My feeling is if you're a good enough athlete, you're going to get noticed. But I understand why there is that pull to go and play on a bigger stage.
Yeah, there's the yes, we'd like to see Cooper Flag play 4 years at Nokomis, but we'd also like to see him play in the NBA.
Exactly. Yeah, and
You
those two
know,
things aren't
I
necessarily compatible.
right. If I have to
Yeah.
pick, I'm gonna take 10 years of the NBA,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just going, how can the Celtics get the number one pick?
Well, and we can say we knew him when, right? We had that one
Right.
magical year.
Yeah, there's just gonna be he's gonna go whenever he ends up wherever team he ends up with, there's gonna be so many jerseys
Oh
from
my
that
goodness.
team at the Civic
Yes.
Center for like the next however many years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's certainly on the right track.
Oh yeah. All right. So then what that brings us to class C
Yeah, and
with baseball.
Class C, the Waynefleet NYA co-op team has been very competitive in recent years, but outside of
Jeez.
that, most of the strong teams kind of lie up in the mid coast, up in the Augusta area. Marana Cook's usually very strong. Winthrop, schools like that. I'm kind of blanking on who some of the other better teams are, but traditionally, schools from down here, Old Orchard Beach, Trape Academy, Sockeye Valley, kind of take a back seat to those others.
Is there a team in the north or like the central or mid coast that's just looming of like kind of like Caribou did for a couple years in basketball, where you're like, well, if we get to the state game, great, but now we got these guys.
Well, I mean, Bangor in baseball is always excellent, and it seems like they're always the team that's in the that represents the North, and often they'll derail the best hopes of even seemingly really invincible teams from down here. I remember several years ago, Falmouth had just a terrific team. They were on the verge of winning a state championship. They even had a lead. I think the game went to the eighth and ninth inning. They took a lead to the bottom of that inning, and Bangor came back and won. Bangor denied South Portland a championship a few years ago before South Portland finally broke through. So, yeah, I think if you're the team from Class A South, you almost expect to see Bangor there. Although Oxford Hills is really good. I mean, they have Eli Soren, and that's a team that's had a lot of success here in boys sports the last couple of years. So they're another one to keep an eye on for sure.
Okay, so let's now talk softball.
Sure.
Who are the teams in softball? Who are the teams to beat?
It's
It's
kind of
softball. I'm going to derail you first. So softball, if I'm remembering correctly, it's a little different in that the pitchers are way more dominant in softball, right? And they
they
can pitch
often
more
are.
often.
Although, yeah, I mean, you often see them pitch every day, every inning in some cases. But softball's kind of shifted in the last few years down here. For the longest time, it was Scarborough and everyone else. And I mean, Scarborough had a run where they won over 100 consecutive regular season games. It seemed like they were in the regional final of the state game every year, kind of like the Patriots there for the at the end of Brady's run. I mean, you knew it, at a bare minimum they were going to be in the regional final. Chances are they were going to be in the state final, and good chance they were going to win it. Tom Griffin did a phenomenal job with that program, won just under 500 games before finally stepping down. Scarborough's still good. I think people are overlooking them a little bit. I think they might be heard from here this season. But this year, the favorites are a Wyndham team that's kind of come of age here the last couple seasons. A lot of freshmen 2 years ago. They've gotten better and better. They're certainly going to be viewed as a team to beat. Biddeford's the reigning champion. Graduation did hit them hard a little bit, but they're really, really strong. Kennebunk has some strong pitching, so they're going to be in the mix as well. I think Cheverus is kind of an up-and-coming team. They're maybe not quite there yet, but they've got some really good young talent. They just need to grow and get better. A lot of good girl athletes at Cheverus right now in multiple sports, as you know. So I'd say, as far as Class A goes, that's what we're looking at there. Class B is kind of interesting. The big story for me in my coverage area last year was Freeport making the playoffs for the first time in 20 years. And it wasn't just because it
Wow.
was an open tournament. They had their best season. They won 11-5. They won a playoff game for the first time since the beginning of the century. A lot of those girls are back. I think they're looking to take the next step this season. Cape won the state title 2 years ago, took a little bit of a step back last year, but they have a new coach this year, Danica Gleason, who was a standout athlete at South Portland. And she's taken over that program. I know she's going to have them in contention in no time. So some good teams to watch there. And York is also very strong down this way. A lot of good hitters. They had a really successful team a year ago. I think they're going to go deep.
Cool. And so and I'll ask you the same question I asked about baseball. Is there a looming team? Is it in the north? Is it Bangor there as well?
It seems like Skowhegan's in the state game a lot. I know that there've been some battles over the years. Skowhegan, Messalonsky, school like that. I mean, I don't know who's kind of favored coming in without doing the research. I can make something off the top of my head, but throwing out those traditional teams, I think are probably ones to keep an eye on for sure.
I feel like in podcasts, the move is always to just throw an idea off the top of your head, just
Yeah.
wing it,
All
just
right.
hope
Well,
for the best.
I'll keep that in mind.
That's what most people seem to do. That's what Kendrick Perkins is doing, and it seems to work for him.
Yeah, whatever works.
All right. So, and the one thing we're going to talk lacrosse, and then I just remembered that I was going to ask you this in the opening because I'm new to this interviewing people thing. What is your take on? So we've had a rash of basketball coaches retire in the last
Yeah.
like 2 weeks. It's been like a crazy run, and I think it's Mike Gray's fault because he was the first one.
He's the trendsetter.
He's the
Yeah.
trendsetter, and everyone was like, "Well, if Mike's going to do it, I'm going to do it," and
Right.
that's sure. So, what is your take on that? Do you think is it just a fluke? Is it just that we had a bunch of people who were at a point where they, were just ready to be done? I don't think doesn't feel like it's a parents are pushing everybody out epidemic.
No, I agree. I mean, it does all seem to be independent of each other. It's kind of interesting that it's all happening here at the same time. I think in some cases, Bob Davies at Thornton Academy, I'm sure he wanted to stay in it and being able to coach his son, Will. I mean, who wouldn't want to coach Will Davies, right? And
Right.
I don't know that's the reason that he's done just after Will's graduating, but it's certainly understandable that he stayed in it as long as he did for that reason. Dean Plant, who doesn't want to go out, the Al McGuire way, winning a title, and you can't ask for a better farewell than that. Part of me wonders if Portland boys had won, would Coach Russo had step away? I mean, he hasn't committed to coming back yet, but he says that every year. And the longer the time goes on, the more I expect him back. So I just think, there's a lot of pressure. People don't realize how much time is spent as a coach. And it's not just from, the end of November till, in a best case scenario, the first week in March. You're busy during the summer, a good chunk of the summer. And really it's a 12-month a year job, keeping up with the kids, trying to keep them engaged with school, keep them, involved with the program. And once the games start, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of commitment, it's a lot of pressure, and these stipends aren't very big. So, I know it's a labor of love for a lot of these men and women who do an awesome job. But you can't go on forever. I know, for every Joe Russo and Dave Halligan, there's many others that just realize that, you don't have the time or the energy, or, in a lot of cases you have young kids, and that's a big pull too, because they're involved with all their activities. And it's impressive to me, the people that can juggle all that as well as they do.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Davies, your son just won Mr. Basketball. Like that's
Right. Yeah.
a pretty good note to go out on. And excuse me,
Right.
you'd
Other than
want to
winning a
stick
state
around to
title, I
coach your
mean, that's,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you'd want to stick around to
So
coach your kids. And then the other thing I see sometimes is people going, "Well, my kid's about to go into high school,
right.
and
And I
I
want to be
either
able to
don't want
watch
to
them.
coach, I want to be
Yeah.
able to be the fan who's the obnoxious fan in the stands yelling at the officials, and not,
Yeah,
not be
and it's funny to me
responsible."
how many of them become that person too. You would think they'd have a little
Yep.
more, or bug the coach about playing time. I'm always floored that, if you had been on the other side of that, how easily, I guess it's human nature.
It's well, if you're no longer coaching, you can't get a technical from the stands.
That's
So,
true. You can get thrown
there's no
out. I've seen fans get thrown out, but
I've seen some
yes,
fans
you
get thrown
could.
out. It's my favorite thing to see at a game because it's always in a game. And most often it's in a game that's like a 40-point game. And the ref's just like, dude,
Right.
it's a 40-point game. Shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I know.
All right. So let's talk about lacrosse. I'm gonna just preface this by saying I know not a single thing about lacrosse. I know that they have a stick with a net on it,
Yep. Right.
and
Very good. That's a
I
start.
think that I think they wear goggles, and that's all I know.
So
I
so there's
They don't have
it's
lacrosse here. When
almost
I was growing up, it wasn't a thing in this area.
right, right. It basically, think of it, lacrosse as two different sports, because the girls' game and the boys' game is totally different. The boys' game,
Oh,
it's kind of like football in the spring, in the sense that it's extremely physical. You can knock people around, you can swat with your stick and try to get the ball loose. Very physical game. I always say it, other than football, that's probably the second most testosterone laden sport. And there
okay.
there is some crossover between those two. The girls' game really does not allow checking to speak of. You can try to knock the stick out of the sphere, but and the girls' stick is totally different than the guys. They have to kind of cradle it and twist it, because otherwise the ball will fall out. So it takes a lot of skill just to be able to
Mm.
maintain possession. Boys' game, it has a deeper pocket, and it can't be too deep though, or it's a penalty. So I mean, those are kind of the basics of it. The goal is the same. Obviously, you want to put the ball in the goal more than the other team, and you win. But if you watch the two games, they are very, very different sports. But they're equally entertaining, just in different ways.
So when I'm watching a movie and they have the real macho testosterone dudes who are the jerks in the movie and they put them
Yeah,
as lacrosse players, that's why.
yeah. Well, it's interesting how that's the casting, but most of the guys I cover are great. But yeah, I mean, I could see where some of that would be applicable.
And so then it's also a little bit like hockey without skates.
True.
It
Yeah, I
sounds
mean,
like a
a
little bit.
lot like football, a lot like hockey, and it's a very entertaining sport. It has grown incredibly. You think about, lacrosse wasn't even sanctioned by the MPA until 1998. Prior to 2006, it was just one class, and as of, I think it was 2018, it went to a third class. So a lot of schools are playing it, and it's branching out more and more. I mean, originally it was basically in the Portland area, Cumberland, York County. I mean, now we have teams in Bangor, Holton. Uh, and we've had teams make it to the state game, that like Oak Hill, Maranacook, Messalonsky, that you wouldn't necessarily think of as lacrosse powerhouses. So the game has grown a lot. It's certainly still strongest down in this area with the Cape Elizabeths and the Yarmouths and Falmouths and teams like that. But I know that baseball and softball have had their numbers hurt in a lot of cases, just because of how popular lacrosse has become.
Yeah, I have heard some of that. And so if it started in 98, that would explain why I don't know anything about it because I graduated in 97
Right.
and so
Yeah, I
and
think so. It did exist. There was a league. It was mostly made up of smaller private schools, and a few public schools that got ahead of the curve, like Cape Elizabeth and Yarmouth, that remain powerhouses to this day. But certainly it was a very different story back then. And now most of the schools have it. Certainly down our way, and I think it's just going to continue to grow in other parts of the state.
Because it doesn't sound like it has a big financial investment. I mean, you've already got your soccer field,
Right.
right? And it's
No,
just
it's
some
it's not like
sticks.
hockey where you have to buy a lot of equipment, get your ice time and weird hours. No, it's relatively inexpensive, and it's a sport that you can pick up fairly quickly. I mean, really, the biggest thing is the stick skills. If you're athletic, if you can learn how to throw and catch, you're gonna do really well.
Yeah, then it's just running and dodging people,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, and
All right.
shooting and scoring
So
ideally.
ideally, ideally. Um, so then the powers, I looked at the state champions and it looks like it's pretty much Falmouth and everybody else. Is that a fair assessment normally?
Well, it's actually Cape Elizabeth and everybody else. I mean, Cape has
Oh, is it? Okay.
dominated. Yeah, Cape has dominated really going back to the 1980s. I mean, this is just the premier program for the boys. They got in on the ground floor. Charlie Birch created a program that won every state title in the 90s. Finally, in 2001, NYA knocked them off in the state game. And then from like 2003 to 2010-ish, Yarmouth was every bit their equal, if not maybe slightly better. And then Falmouth had a little bit of a run where Falmouth and Cape had a great rivalry for about 5, 6 years. But in the last couple of seasons, Cape has kind of gotten back to that level where it's them and everyone else. They even made a documentary a couple seasons ago on their undefeated championship team that won a
Oh,
state title for the first time in a couple years, and it was their first Class A title. It was the only thing they hadn't done yet was win Class A, and then they of course repeated this last season. So uh, Ben Raymond's been the coach since 1998. He also is the boys soccer coach and very successful swim coach at Cape Elizabeth. And he just these kids grow up watching their heroes at the high school. They want to become them, and a lot of them go on and play at college and play at a very high level. And Cape's always the team to beat. And again this year, I mean, I don't think they're quite as dominant maybe as they've been the last couple seasons. Thornton Academy is very strong. They won a couple of state titles right before COVID. They were the champions in 2018, 2019. And they were in the regional final last year. They actually knocked Cape off in the regular season last year. I think they're going to be right there with them. A lot of really good teams in Class A this year, and it's all one region. It's not north and south. Falmouth, South Portland, they're certainly going to be heard from too. Scarborough. These are all teams that are used to going deep, have won state championships, and everyone's chasing Cape, but there's some really good teams there. And in Class B, Brunswick upset Yarmouth in the state final last year. I wouldn't be surprised if those two teams are on a collision course again. But you've got Messalonsky Coney on the girls' side had a really good year last year. Just continuing to see the game evolve in the mid coast, and then Class C really has become an NYA Waynfleet showdown every year. Unfortunately, with the heel points, the first couple of years of three classes, they didn't play in the state game. They played in the semis, and that was the de facto state game. But last year, they finally did match up in the state game. It was an epic double overtime. Waynfleet won it. It's the longest ever state game. No state game had ever gone more than one overtime. That one went two. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if those two teams are on a collision course again. And that's basically the boys side summarized, a lot of the same names, and a lot of the same teams. And the nice thing is the way the schedule is now, they went from 12 games to 14, so it gives some of these top teams even more of an opportunity to play each other.
oh, so they're playing 14 this. Is 14 new this year?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
because
this
I
is the
was looking
first
at
year. It was
last
always
year.
it was always 12. It was always 12 prior to this, so they're going 14. And for a long time the SMA didn't want to play out of schedule, out of conference, but that's changed now, and you're really starting to see. That's why Cape Elizabeth and South Portland can play twice, and they should. They're right next door to each other. They're two of the five
Right,
best teams in the state, so it just makes a lot of sense.
right. So they're okay. So I was setting up the spreadsheets and I was looking at last year and I saw 12, and
Right.
that was sort of my assumption. So now I can fix that,
Uh-huh.
and my math won't be all screwy. What's your take on the conferences opening up? Because especially with the SMAA and everybody else, the MVC famously
It's just
in basketball.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great. I think it's good for everybody, especially you look at the Mountain Valley Conference in basketball, especially on the boys' side, how much those teams had struggled coming down and playing in the tournament against Western Maine Conference teams that play a much tougher regular season. And I know a lot of the MVC schools were clamoring for that for a long time. I just think you want to play the best schedule you can. And winning games by 20, 30, 40, 50 points every night doesn't do you any good. and it's not a
Yeah.
whole heck of a lot of fun to watch or to cover either. So I think it's great. And you can still keep your traditional rivals, but why not have a couple games against teams that are kind of equal to where you are in the standings? To kind of fill out the schedule with that. I just think it makes so much sense, and I think it's a step in the right direction. And it seems like most of the conferences are on board now, which is really great to see.
One thing that Scott Bessie said to me that I thought was really interesting is he said it's not even people think it's the playing the tougher schedule, and that certainly helps to play a tougher schedule. But a big thing when you're prepping for a tournament game is if you've even if you haven't played the team you're playing, if you've played teams they played, and so you
Right.
can watch the tape. So if you've got Cape and you didn't play
Sure.
Cape, but you played Yarmouth, so you can at
Uh-huh.
least watch the game of them with Yarmouth, and you can go, okay, this
Yeah.
is how in relation to them, this is what we're looking at. This is how fast these guys are. This is how big they are. It's stuff like that.
Absolutely, and it's just kind of fun to mix things up every now and then, and see schools you don't see that often, and see other players that you might not ever see except for in a tournament setting. So I just hope it continues, and I think most I know the coaches certainly have felt this way for a long time, but it's nice to see that the athletic directors and some of the other powers that be are starting to see the value of that.
And yeah, it feels like the coaches have gone out of their way more to get games out, like get their scrimmages against teams that they might either see in the tournament or
Yeah,
just get the hardest game you can get. Like Gardner went and played Chevrolet, and they didn't have to go play Chevrolet. They could have played
yeah.
anyone for that game.
Right, right. But it pays off in the long run, and and especially now with the limited number of dates that you have for exhibition games, you might as well maximize those opportunities and really, even if it's a team that you're probably not going to beat, you're still going to learn from it. You're still going to get better from it. You see some of the elite teams here in the state will actually play out of state teams for exhibitions. Cape Elizabeth, Falmouth, these lacrosse powerhouses will play the teams like Pinkerton from New Hampshire. They generally don't win that game, and they might go undefeated
Right.
in the regular season, but that game's going to have more value for them than their other 12, 14 games put together in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if you're a lacrosse team and you could go down to like Long Island for a week
Yeah,
and play two or three teams, that would do wonders for you. And plus, it's better for the kids to have that experience rather than just playing Yarmouth again, to go play a
right.
team in New Hampshire, go play a team in Boston or whatever.
Right, and not only that, I mean, a lot of the spring teams will take the April vacation trips to Florida and get a chance to not only get a weather break, but see teams from all over the country, and that's another opportunity to work on your game and get better. So these are all good. These are all great opportunities, and hopefully they continue.
All right, so let's talk girls lacrosse. Who's the powerhouse? And is it also Cape Elizabeth?
It's Kennebunk. Kennebunk is the two-time defending champs. They've won 32 games in a row. They are 4 games shy of the state record, which is held by Waynfleet in 2004 to 2006. And Brunswick also won 36 games in a row, playing a very different type of schedule. But those two have the record. Kennebunk's on the brink of breaking that, and they have the best player in the state without a doubt in Ruby Slukowski, who's going to go play at Brown next year. This is going to be her senior season. She missed her freshman year altogether because the year was canceled by COVID. She kind of showed up as a secret weapon as a sophomore and wasn't a secret for very long. She's tough to stop. Great player, fun to watch. There's certainly the team to beat, but Class A has some other really good teams too. Yarmouth moved up to A last year. They had been B forever. They actually won the Class B title in 2021. They wanted to move up and play the best last year, and they wound up getting to states. They fell 3 goals shy against Kennebunk, but they played really well. Their star player Caitlin D'Apollonia is now at the University of Colorado, which just goes to show that Maine does produce some pretty good talent there. They'll be tough again. Falmouth, Sloan Ginnivan, I know you know who she is. She's going to be playing lacrosse at Notre Dame. Unfortunately, she couldn't play basketball this winter because she's still recovering from a knee injury from last spring, but she will be back for lacrosse. I think Falmouth's going to be really, really tough too. So whether Kennebunk goes undefeated again, I don't know. I still think in my minds, they're the team to beat, but a third straight title will not come easily. I'm curious to see if they can get that state record win streak because I know they have some tough games early in the season. So that's kind of really the story on the A side. Class B, Greeley finally broke through last year, won their first title in the MPA era. they lost one player to graduation. They have everybody else back. I think I'd alluded to earlier, Coney had a very good year last year. Greeley beat them in the semis. So that's a team from a little bit further afield from Cumberland County that should be kind of strong. York's very good. And Class C is interesting too. You got Waynefleet and NYA opening the season tomorrow. They've won the last two titles. Waynefleet won it 2 years ago. NYA won it last year. And Freeport, excellent team. They've been the ones that they've been left on the outside looking in because Waynefleet beat them by a goal in the state game 2 years ago. Last year, Freeport got upset by NYA by a goal in the semis. They're hungry. They want to break through. They have a great player by the name of Kate Tracy, who will be at Wesleyan next year. So it seems like in all these classes, you have multiple teams. Yeah, you have a favorite, but I wouldn't say anybody's a sure thing going in. And that should just make for a fun season.
Very cool. Is there more crossover on the girls' side from basketball than there is on the boys' side, or would you say it's about equal in terms of
I would
players?
say it's about equal. I mean, without like really studying the rosters, I'd just say off the top of my head, it's probably pretty close.
I know that Lizzie Gruber, I think I've seen photos of her doing lacrosse, which seems like a terrifying thing for an opponent to have
I
her
was just going
flying
to say
down the
that I would
field.
not want to be, I would not want to have to stand in her way and try to stop her. Of course, she can't grab any rebounds, but still,
It's
that's got to
true.
be a formidable sight.
Get those legs going, and you're just like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah.
I
And
saw
again,
her in. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, again, if you're a good athlete, and once you learn those stick skills, I mean, it's going to make life tough for everyone else.
I saw a game up here where they put her at the top of the zone
Yeah,
on defense,
yeah,
guarding the ball.
yep.
And
That's
that
I'm
poor.
guessing you're not scoring many goals in that situation.
No, it was this poor point guard is like 5'3", and she looks up and there's Lizzie Gruber with her arms
Yeah,
stretched out. She's like, what do I do now?
yeah.
Are there looming teams in not field hockey, in lacrosse? I know in field hockey the looming team is Skowhegan always. But in girls lacrosse, is there a looming team up north?
Oh, let's see. That's a good question. I think Coney's going to be good. Messalonsky's had a lot of success over the years, and including that's a program that's won championships. Bangor is a program that's a newer program that they were in the playoffs last year. I think they're slowly starting to put it together, and that's the nice thing is you're seeing as time goes on these programs that are younger that are starting to catch up, and that's kind of the impetus that a third class was created for 5 years ago, was to give really young programs a chance to compete, as well as smaller schools kind of give them a home. NYA and Waynefleet are really good, but they're not beating Cape and Yarmouth in the playoffs, so it gives them a chance to compete for a championship at that level, and it gives a lot of other programs just a chance to kind of get up to speed, and I think it's worked out pretty well. So hopefully as time goes on, you're going to see maybe some schools that you're not really thinking of as lacrosse schools becoming competitors and getting to regional finals and perhaps state finals. And a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think that would be great for the sport.
They've kind of been using Class D for that in football, right?
Yeah,
For
that's the
teams that had
theory. Yeah.
programs.
Right, and that's worked out pretty well too. And there's been a developmental league now and then that's helped. Football is an interesting phenomenon just because it's lost so many numbers in so many towns, including down this way. Programs that you wouldn't even think of that are struggling for numbers, kind of need a place to go, and that's kind of what the 8-man option is now.
Right. Yeah. I haven't even looked at the 8-man stuff. But it was just they take out the linemen basically. So you're basically looking at your skill players.
Yeah, you take out a couple. It's a fun, and it's actually shorter with the length of the field is the same, but width-wise it's closer. But it's a fun game
Okay.
to watch. I did the Yarmouth Waterville State game this year. Thrilling game, came down to the last second. It's certainly a good quality of play. So, and it's a great option for some of these programs that traditionally struggle for numbers. And in football, you've got to have a certain number of healthy bodies to be able to play.
Yeah, it's not like basketball where you can be Seacoast Christian and roll up with 6 people
Yeah,
and hope for the best.
or thrive. Yeah, right. Until the state game. Yeah,
Until the state game. Well, you get up against Southern Heuristic and you need a lot of people. You need
yeah.
an army
All right.
to hold your own against
No
them.
doubt.
I still don't know where they find all those people up there to play basketball. I just there's not
That's
a lot
what
of
you
people
do.
up there.
That's what you do, right? I've never actually been to the county. And I know that they love their basketball up there, and I know there's been
Oh
some
yeah.
great players that have come from up there. It would be a lot of fun, I think, to take in that setting sometime.
Yeah, it would be great to go up to like Easton and Southern Rustic and Presque Isle, Caribou, and just check out those gyms. Like, I feel like
Absolutely.
if I was 10 years younger and not married, I would probably be doing that on a regular basis.
You
But
could probably do a lot of things if that were the case. And yeah, I hear you.
yeah,
Now, one of these years, I'd love to take a sabbatical, even if it's like for a week or two, and just go places that I've never been before. And because I know,
yeah,
you get a taste of it in the tournament when the schools from up north bring down the bands and bring down half the town, and it's kind of a Hoosiers like environment. It's got to be so much fun to be able to actually see them on their home court and be in that actual setting. I got to put that on my sports watching bucket list to make a trip and do that sometime.
you get a little bit of it with the streaming now because you can
Yes,
go,
that
I'll sort
helps.
of bounce around. I have
Mhm.
to bounce around just to find scores for some of these games, and I'll end up watching like the last two
Yeah,
minutes of a game at Jonesport Beals, and I'm like, man, that's a cool court design.
yeah,
That's pretty sweet. There's like
right.
10
And it's
people in that
great that you
gym.
can actually do that now. I mean, it's one of the few good things that came out of COVID was those that do. It's a wonderful way to check out games from elsewhere because it's not like there's an ESPN that's bringing you from one game to another. So you got to
Right.
search it out on your own. But that's great if you can do it. And I know, yeah, when Greeley had that crazy 8 overtime game against Freiburg earlier this year, people were tuning in on the stream, and otherwise, you would have had to race to Cumberland to try to catch the OTs, which probably wasn't realistic.
Well, I don't know. It depends on which overtime you left during.
That's
You might have
true.
been able to
That
get
that
there for the end of it.
that that was something else, and unfortunately, I wasn't there that night, and that's just my luck. I usually pick the wrong games, but no one thought
Yeah.
Greeley Freiburg in late January was going to be a game worth seeing. So, just goes
Yeah.
to
I
show you never know.
I think I heard about it like halfway through the eighth overtime, and I was like, wait,
Yeah.
what? What's happening? There's
Yeah, I heard
no,
it. I
they're not
heard
in
in the
the eighth overtime.
fifth, and then it just kept going and going from there. But and it's not like a lot of the famous multi overtime games didn't have a lot of big shots, a lot of dramatic plays. That Bangor South Portland 5 overtime game, the famous one from 1992. One of the overtimes was 0-0. So I mean, there was one big buzzer beater in that game, but for the most part, it was attrition. And whoever had the ball last would hold for the shot and try to win. This Greeley Freiburg game had multiple overtimes where someone hit a game tying three, sometimes from impossible angles. I mean, a couple of those shots were just crazy. And
Insane.
I think that adds to the lore, and that's what made that game so special.
There's I was doing some research on it after the game, and there's a 13 overtime game in
Yeah.
the Carolinas, a girls game that finished in the 30s. And so you can just imagine how
Yes.
bad that was. It was like 8 straight
Right.
overtimes that were scoreless.
Right, because you'd get the ball and you'd hold for a shot, right? And then
Yeah.
you didn't score, and it's on the next. I mean, that's no fun to watch, and it
Yeah,
doesn't.
that's
It's not near as dramatic as a game where you have big play after big play to keep it going.
yeah, it must have been pretty painful to sit there through
I would,
like
yeah.
8 straight scoreless
It's
overtimes.
like,
You're
when
like,
is this going to end? Yeah.
"Oh," it's like, "We don't have beer sales for this? Are we sure we don't have beer sales for this game?"
Back then they
Uh,
might have. Who knows?
oh, yeah, that's true. In the Carolinas, maybe. They
Yeah.
probably said moonshine underneath the bleachers.
Oh, I bet there was some of that getting passed around.
All right, so I wanted to ask you, I've been asking everybody this question. Okay, so imagine that the MPA goes up to you and they say, "Okay, you're in charge. One day,
Mhm.
you can do whatever you want. Cost is no factor. And you don't have to go through a committee. You don't have to like get it approved by the member schools. You don't have to convince any athletic directors to do it. Nothing. You don't even have to convince Twitter. What's the thing you change about
Well,
any we'll
what
pick any sport, but preferably basketball because then I'll know what you're talking about.
No, no, let's start with I mean, the first thing I would do is I would turn the clock back to where the big class tournament is the week after everything else. This is kind of what I grew up with in my early days as a reporter. I knew I was going to spend a week in Augusta covering the Western B, Western C, Western D tournament, and soaking it all in and taking it all in every day, and then knowing that the following week it was on to the big class tournament at the Civic Center. They'd have the boys semifinals on Friday night. Everyone called that the best night of the year. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that still fondly remember that as the best night of the year. And then you turn right around on Saturday and you'd have your regional finals. And then you'd have, so the smaller classes had the stage all to themselves. Then you had the big class the following week. I would would go back to that. I mean, there's the way the Class double A tournaments held right now. It's far from my sight. They're being played on the campuses of the higher seeds, and I'm selfish because I'm missing games. That's part of the reason I don't like it. And then even when you get to
Mhm.
the semifinals at the Civic Center, there's games going on concurrently at the Expo. So again, you can't get to everything, and you got the Portland boys playing at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. You're just not getting the crowds that you would get if you would have it the way it used to be. I know it's probably wishful thinking, but that's one thing I would change absolutely. I'd also change the way they do the seating for the press at the expo, where you don't get walked on constantly. But I guess I can't have everything. But no, I think if there were just the one thing that I had the power to have an opinion on and maybe affect some change, it would be that. It seemed to me that wasn't broken. It didn't need fixing, and it's not better. And then the
Mhm.
changes that they've made have not been better. I remember for a while they had the double A's up in Augusta, and in front of you'd have Portland and Deering playing in a regional final in Augusta for a fraction of the crowd that you would have had if it were down in Portland. So I don't know. I'm
And then
not
all
expecting anything to change there, but I wish it would.
the other side of that is with the double when the double A games are going on, like no one's paying attention to the Class C games
Right.
that are being played in Augusta because everyone's focused, like all the media. If you're media and you're covering it, unless
Exactly.
you're on the Old Orchard Beach beat,
Right.
you're going to be covering the double A school because it's a bigger school. There's a bigger audience for your readers or your listeners or your viewers or whoever it is.
Yeah. I mean, I the more basketball, the better, right? Let's make this
Yeah.
thing go a couple weeks or 3 weeks, whatever. I mean, well into March, and in a lot of states, I don't think they even get their tournament going until well into March, and it goes until like the middle of the month. And maybe that's extreme for here, but I do think that we could make this last another week and give the big class schools their own limelight. And I think you'd see people flock to whatever they're calling the Civic Center these days, Cross
I just call
Insurance.
it the
Is it
hockey
the
rink.
center or the arena? I still call it the Civic Center. And it's still cold down there on the floor, no matter what, with the with
It's
the hockey
cold
rink under the
everywhere in that
boards.
building.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
freezing.
It's for sure. Unless it's a packed crowd. For state games, it's great, and the Expo is a wonderful venue. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to have regional finals and state finals there for some of the lower classes. It just seems to make a lot of sense.
I think it worked well for B. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure they were going to be able to fit everybody in there, but it was a great atmosphere.
Right, and I guess, depending who's in it, maybe that would affect it too, and not to say that the teams that were in it didn't bring good crowds, because they did, but I wonder if, more Portland-centric teams had been in it, maybe it would have been a little more full. But, so you have a few people standing around, there's nothing wrong with that either. Just a great environment, though.
I always think it's funny that we rush to finish the basketball season and
Yeah.
then we go, well, we can't play on the fields.
Right, and there's nothing.
we,
Yeah, I mean,
we got
and
to
and
push the
then
baseball games because the grass is too wet.
right,
And it's
and
like,
and
yeah,
I
we
know that
can.
your spring season's gonna be short. There's not much you can do about that. I mean, realistically, you can't really. I mean, right now we're having is amazing, but this isn't a typical April 12th. Games start
But it
tomorrow. It's
just
gonna be
snowed.
60 degrees. I'm thrilled with that. I think there'll be a payback at some point, but so that does. You're right, and I mean, I love having the month break, and especially after the basketball tournament, I need to come up for air for a little bit. But they could adjust it a week or two, and I'd be fine with that. But I mean, they want everything in February vacation week, and I get that.
Mhm. I kind of liked how the snow forced them to spread the state games out a little bit
Yeah.
so that you had, like, there was a scenario there where we were going to get each class getting their own day. And I was like, ooh,
I
I kind of
and
like
that's another
this.
thing I would advocate for. I remember not many years ago, didn't D play on like Thursday night, and then you'd have someone on Friday, and then you'd have someone else Saturday. Yeah, I
That
wish
sounds
I
right.
wish every class had their own day, their own even the Saturdays now, where you have all the games in Portland, and then you'll have, I think, C and D playing at the same time. I mean, look, a lot of this just comes from my own selfishness, where I want to see everything, and
Mhm.
I wish that it was spread out so everyone had their own platform.
Yeah, and it's nice to get everybody, especially if you get to a state game. I mean, you should have the spotlight all to yourself
I
for
totally
that
agree.
two
Yep,
hours or whatever it is. I think that would
absolutely.
be great.
Yep, and bring the whole state together, and give people an opportunity to see schools they probably never heard of, probably the names they couldn't spell or pronounce, but it's fun. and it's the biggest event on the high school sports calendar, and I think we should have more of it, not less.
Yeah, it's always fun when you like come across a class D or a class C team that you haven't seen because they're in way up there. And you're like, oh my goodness, this guy can play. Like this
Right.
kid can really play. Like there's I think a lot of people saw Elise McNair and went, oh wow,
Yeah.
she's legit good.
Right. Right. And that's the beauty of again, because you're not going to know that during the regular season if you're used to just following the big schools.
Yeah. All right. Well, that I think is all I have for you. How can people
All
find
right.
you on the interwebs?
Well, I do tweet a lot, as people know. I'm at Four Sports, FORE Sports, and all my articles, my long web articles, can be found. You can go to the forecaster.net and click on sports. That's how I get the thing. Especially when you write for a smaller paper, as I did for a long time, kind of get the word out. That's kind of helped spread the word about what I do.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining me. This has been the Maine Basketball Ranking Show, which is brought to you by MaineBasketballRankings.com. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, do the subscribing and the liking and the 5 stars and all the fun algorithm nonsense because that really helps. And thank you once again for doing this.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. It's been an enjoyable hour.
All right. Thank you so much.